In this video, I'm going to show you a Hexon RR700, and I'm going to show you all the things that are wrong with this and how to fix it. I'm also going to share with you which parts you need to be able to fix this turbo. This turbo uses an OEM size TD04 thrust bearing and OEM size collars. The collars are about 12 millimeter diameter. The upgraded ones here are 14 millimeter. These provide a better amount of stance on the thrust bearing, so it helps prevent from wearing out. This one also has an upgraded 2 oil port thrust bearing, so this helps provide better oiling and better protection from wearing out from a thrust bearing failure. The whole purpose of the thrust bearing is to keep the turbo from moving in and out, and if you don't have a good quality thrust bearing and you plan to run high boost, then usually this is what happens. It wears out really bad there. So if you want to go with the upgraded bearing, we have those, but this one still has to be modified to work in the bearing housing, or the bearing housing has to be modified for this bearing to work, because the dowel, the alignment pin, is located here on the bearing housing. So, and you can't, it's a bad idea to drill on the bearing housing, because if you drill that area on the bearing housing for the pin, it cuts through the coolant port. That's why the pin was over on this side. So, on this side I mean. So because of that, the coolant part's on this side. But because of that, you have to grind the old pin off or drill this thrust bearing to fit the pin there in the thrust bearing, or you can grind the old pin off and put a pin somewhere else on the bearing where it won't cut through the coolant ports if you were to drill it for that. So the compressor housing wasn't really fully machined out. This is going to cause back pressure problems, but I can easily machine that and fix this problem. But I don't have the rear turbo, but I may as well fix the front turbo so I know that's correct. The heat shield, the sealing surface is really tiny on this turbo, on the heat shield I mean, and it's like a press fit onto the bearing housing. That's not a failure point, it's just that's something that I thought was kind of interesting and unique about this turbo. It looks like this one has a 19T compressor wheel. It measures 46 millimeter by 58 millimeter. The turbine measurements, I got about 41 by 47 millimeter. The journal bearings are an odd size, but I do have those. They're the same as the RR550s that I showed you guys. And I think I may have listed a rebuild kit on there. If not, I probably need to do that. The difference is, if you want to buy the rebuild kit, I'm probably not going to modify the bearing for you to fit inside the bearing housing unless I can purchase them or have them custom made to where they're already modified, so I don't have to worry about that and you don't have to worry about that problem either. That's something that I've been looking into. I just haven't had that completely done yet. This turbine shaft is bigger than the RR550s, so this one I'm going to have to get replacements for if we want to be able to replace this. This one is cracked really bad and it's starting to chip off. The reason it's like that is because of the in and out shaft play that caused that problem. It's a possibility that I could just maybe be able to cut the cracks out of it and be able to reuse it, but it makes more sense to replace this. But it really depends how much time this customer wants to wait on getting these shafts remade, because it's definitely not an easy thing to have done in a reasonable time frame. Here's the bearing housing. There's nothing really different about this. I mean, if you look at this, it's just an OEM bearing housing but machined for the compressor wheel to fit, and then the back side is machined for a bigger turbine seal, which is the TD04 seal. Things that you do need to know if you're going to add the upgraded collar is that this area does have to be machined out bigger for the upgraded collar to work. Like I said, there's the alignment pin. If you put the pin on this side, it usually cuts through the coolant jackets. But maybe if you put it close enough over here, you wouldn't have that problem, but I'm not really sure. I just ran into that problem once before. It is is a possibility that you might be able to prevent this problem from happening if you just run thicker oil. I run 1540 in my BMW. The reason I do that is not based on what the manufacturer recommends. What I run is based on what I recommend for the turbochargers running high boost and more heat. It's more important for me to be able to oil and protect the turbochargers than it is anything else, because if the turbochargers start leaking oil, then that oil is going to start being consuming through the turbos, and the engine eventually is going to run out of oil through that way and destroy the engine. So when you protect the turbos, you protect the whole engine. Right now I have everything to repair this turbo besides the turbine shafts. If you haven't seen my video on the Hexon RR700 turbo rebuild, I recommend that you watch that, because there was a couple things I had to do to make the TD04 rebuild kit work in that. I also had to have the bearings, journal bearings custom made. I had to modify the thrust bearing to make that work, and the rear seal also had to be filed to be able to fit inside the bearing housing correctly. I showed you how to gap it in that video as well. So watch that video if you're interested in watching more videos on the Hexon turbos, because a lot of the stuff is similar. However, there are other Hexons out there that aren't the same as this. I have another Hexon RR700 that I'm rebuilding, but the journal bearings are not the same as shown in this video and my other video. So that wraps up everything for this video. If you need parts for this, I'll leave links in the description box of what I do have. If I don't leave those links, you can always send me an email at turbolabamerica@gmail.com. For the turbines, those have to be custom made. I don't have those as of today, September 2018. And for the journal bearings, I do have those in stock. So I basically can make you a whole rebuild kit besides the turbine shaft and modifying the thrust bearing, depending on how you want that to work on there. The rear seal does have to be gapped, or it might for this one, but it did for the 550s, so it might have to be gapped. So just keep that in mind. And the compressor wheel should be a regular 19T billet compressor wheel, so you should be able to just buy that from online or something if I don't have it, because I know I don't have that in stock right now. Anyway, if you want to see more videos just like this one, I recommend you watch the Hexon RR700 video.